Ethan Hale hadn't spoken to a child in 4 years. Not since the night the ground caved in at Red Ridge Mine and buried his younger brother alive, while Ethan stood above, helpless, listening to the screaming stop. Since then, he rode alone. Montana Territory didn't know his name, and he intended to keep it that way. He planned to work summer ranch jobs, move on before anyone asked questions, and leave no footprint behind except in dust. That was the plan. Then the boy grabbed his leg. Ethan had just dismounted at the shallow river crossing to water his horse when something small slammed into his thigh. Hands, dirty, shaking hands, locked around him like iron. "Sir, please, help us." Ethan froze. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. Barefoot, shirt torn, knees scraped raw. His dark hair clung to his forehead, soaked not from water, but sweat and fear. "Let go," Ethan said, not unkindly. "You'll scare the horse." "I don't care," the boy said, voice cracking. "They're coming." They said they'd come today. Ethan looked down, really looked. This wasn't a child asking for charity. This was a child bracing for impact. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Lucas," the boy said fast. "Lucas Bennett. My mama's hurt. She can't run." Ethan's chest tightened. He had heard that tone before. The tone people use when time is already running out. "Where is she?" Ethan asked. Lucas pointed up the hill, toward a stretch of trees where smoke curled thin and gray into the sky. "At the cabin. They want the land. They said if she don't sign today, they'll take me instead." Ethan straightened slowly. "Who's they?" "The men from the mill," Lucas said, "and the sheriff knows." Of course he does, Ethan thought. He should leave. Every instinct screamed it. He could mount up, cross the river, disappear into the valley like he always did. No names, no promises, no graves left behind. But Lucas tightened his grip. "You don't have to fight," the boy whispered. "Just stand there. Please. Mama says bad men hate witnesses." That did it. Ethan exhaled through his teeth and rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "All right," he said quietly. "Show me." Lucas let go instantly, like he knew Ethan wouldn't walk away now. He took off up the trail, not looking back, certain Ethan would follow. The cabin was worse than Ethan expected. One wall sagged. The roof leaked. The door hung crooked on its hinges. But the place was clean, swept. A pot simmered on the stove. Someone was trying. Hard. A woman sat at the table, her arm wrapped in a blood-stained cloth. She looked up sharply when they entered. "Lucas," she snapped. "I told you not to." Her eyes locked on Ethan. Everything changed. Her name was Mary Bennett. 30, maybe. Strong jaw. Tired eyes. The kind of woman who didn't cry because crying cost energy she didn't have. "I didn't beg him," Lucas said fast. "I asked." Mary's gaze never left Ethan. "We don't need charity." "Ain't offering," Ethan replied. "I'm passing through. Thought I'd lend a hand." The front door slammed open. 3 men stood outside. Mill boots. Sheriff's deputy badge. Smiles with no warmth behind them. Well, one said, "Looks like you got company." Mary stood. Lucas stepped in front of her, without thinking. Ethan took 1 step forward, and for the first time in 4 years, his hands didn't shake. The men didn't step inside. They didn't need to. Men like that never rushed. They let fear do the walking for them. The tallest one leaned against the doorframe. Thumbs hooked his belt. Deputy's badge catching the light. His smile was practiced. Polite. "Empty, Mrs. Bennett," he said. "We talked about today." Mary stood straighter, even with blood seeping through the cloth on her arm. "I told you already. The land isn't for sale." The deputy's eyes flicked to Ethan. "And I told you," he replied calmly, "that refusing won't stop what's coming. It'll just make it harder on the boy." Lucas stiffened. Ethan felt it, something old and dangerous stirring in his chest. "Who are you?" the deputy asked. "Just a drifter," Ethan said, "passing through." The deputy smiled wider. "Then this doesn't concern you." Ethan didn't move. Mary spoke first. "My husband built this cabin with his own hands. He died in the mill collapse you signed off as unavoidable. You think I'd sell you the ground that killed him? One of the mill men shifted uncomfortably. The deputy's smile faded. This isn't about history. It's about legality. You owe back taxes. You're behind on supply credit. And this property sits on land the mill needs. He held out folded papers. Sign, and you keep the boy with you. Refuse, and the county steps in. Lucas turned, eyes wide. Mama? Mary didn't look at the papers. She looked at Ethan. Just once. Not pleading. Measuring. Ethan stepped forward. Let me see those. The deputy laughed. You can't read legal. I said let me see them. Something in Ethan's voice made the deputy hesitate. Slowly, he handed them over. Ethan scanned the pages and frowned. The signature line, Ethan said, tapping the page, isn't notarized. And this debt notice references a ledger dated 6 months after your mill fire. Silence. You're rushing her, Ethan continued, which means you're hiding something. The mill man snapped. You don't know what you're talking about. I know when men threaten children to steal land. The deputy's jaw tightened. Careful, drifter. Ethan folded the papers neatly and handed them back. You come back with a lawful order, he said. Until then, get off her porch. The deputy stared at him. Then he smiled again, but now there was something sharp behind it. This isn't over. They left dust and silence behind them. Lucas collapsed onto a chair, shaking. Mary sank slowly back down. Her knees gave out only once the danger passed. Ethan closed the door. You shouldn't have done that, she said quietly. Probably not, Ethan replied. She looked at him then. Really looked. You could have walked away. So could they. Mary pressed a cloth tighter to her arm. They'll be back. With court orders. With men. I know. She hesitated. Why stay? Ethan didn't answer right away, because he'd asked himself that same question every night for 4 years. Finally, he said, because your boy ran to a stranger instead of hiding. Lucas looked up. I knew you'd help. Ethan swallowed. Don't do that, he said gently. Don't put faith in men you don't know. Lucas nodded. Mama says hope is risky, but giving up is worse. Mary closed her eyes at that. That night, Ethan slept on the cabin floor. Not because Mary asked, because he chose to. Outside, the mill lights burned late into the dark, and somewhere between the creak of wood and the boy's steady breathing, Ethan realized something he hadn't allowed himself to think in years. He hadn't come here by accident. Ethan woke before dawn, not because of noise, because the silence was wrong. The cabin usually breathed at night, with settling, wind to the trees, the low rustle of the river. That morning it felt held, like the land itself was waiting. He stepped outside. Mist hugged the ground. The mill lights were still glowing in the distance, faint but steady, like an unblinking eye. Behind him, the door creaked. Mary stood in the doorway, her arm freshly wrapped, her face pale but determined. You always wake this early, she asked. I sleep light, Ethan said. She nodded. Lucas does too. Nightmares. Ethan glanced toward the small loft. About his father? About men with papers. That landed harder. Mary poured water from the pump and handed him a tin cup. They'll be back, she said. Not today. Soon. I figured. She studied him over the rim of her cup. You weren't lying yesterday about knowing how these things work. No. Then you also know why they want this land. Ethan looked toward the river. I have a guess. She hesitated, then reached under the table and pulled out a folded notebook, edges worn soft from use. My husband kept records, she said. Not of the mill, of the water. Ethan took it carefully. Inside were dates, notes, sketches of the river bend, measurements taken at different points, dead fish, sick livestock, headaches, tremors, poison, Ethan said quietly. Mary nodded. The mill dumps upstream, just enough that nobody notices all at once. But it builds. And your husband found it. Yes. And he died before he could prove it. Mary's jaw tightened. They said it was an accident. Ethan closed the notebook. They don't want your land, he said. They want silence. A small voice spoke from behind them. I found something. Lucas stood barefoot in the dirt, holding a rusted metal box. I dug by the old oak, he said. Papa told me never to tell anyone, but Mama said secrets that hurt people aren't secrets anymore. Mary's breath caught. She knelt and opened the box. Inside were 3 glass jars, sealed with wax, each labeled in careful handwriting. Upstream, downstream, well water. Ethan exhaled slowly. That's evidence, he said. Real evidence. Mary's hand shook. Enough? Enough to scare them. Lucas looked between them. Does that mean they'll stop? Ethan met his eyes. No, he said gently. It means they'll try harder. As if summoned, hooves thundered on the road. 3 riders, one of them wearing the sheriff's star. Mary grabbed the jars. What do we do? Ethan didn't hesitate. We split them. He took 1 jar and wrapped in his shirt. 1 stays buried where it was, he said. 1 goes somewhere safe. And 1 stays with me. Lucas swallowed. Why you? Because if they take me, Ethan replied, they won't take everything. The riders pulled up hard. Dust clouded the yard. The sheriff dismounted slowly, eyes scanning the cabin, the fence, the land. You're causing trouble, he said. Ethan stepped forward, steady. No, he said. You're afraid of daylight. The sheriff's eyes hardened. This is your last warning. Ethan didn't blink. Then make it count. That night, Ethan didn't sleep, because now it wasn't just about a boy and his mother. It was about a truth buried in the ground, and men who would burn the land before letting it surface. The fire started just before dawn. Ethan smelled it before he saw it. Sharp, oily wrong. He was already moving when smoke crept on the cabin door. Mary, he shouted. Fire. The door burst open. Mary stumbled out, Lucas right behind her, clutching his wooden toy horse to his chest. The garden was burning. Flames crawled along the fence line, fed by kerosene, snapping and hissing like something alive. Heat rolled toward the barn where the hay was stacked high. They're trying to scare us, Mary said, voice steady but eyes bright with fury. They're trying to destroy evidence, Ethan replied. Lucas looked between them. I didn't tell anyone. I know, Mary said, pulling him close. You did nothing wrong. They worked fast. Buckets, dirt, wet blankets. Ethan beat down the edges while Mary directed him, calm and fierce like a woman who'd faced worse than fire. When it was over, the fence was gone. Half the garden was ash. Smoke hung low and bitter in the air. Lucas stood barefoot in the blackened soil, silent. They burned Mama's food, he said quietly. Ethan crouched and examined the ground. Boot prints, 2 sets, 1 heavy, 1 lighter, and horse tracks, 1 with a damaged shoe. The sheriff's horse. Mary saw it too. They want us angry, she said. They want you to do something stupid. Ethan's jaw clenched. I won't. He meant it, but the promise cost him. By mid-morning, the town already knew. People watched from porches as Mary walked the well, as Ethan rebuilt the fence line, as Lucas carried water with hands too small for the bucket. No one came to help, until someone did. A woman approached just after noon, walking fast, eyes darting. Her name was Clara Finch. My boy's sick, she said without greeting. Been sick for years. Mary didn't pretend surprise. Shaking hands. Mary asked, headaches? Stomach pain. Clara nodded, tears spilling. The doctor says nerves. I say water. Ethan brought out the notebook. Clara read, shaking. You're not alone, Mary said. You never were. That night, the 3 of them sat at the table, lantern light flickering across the jars. We need the town, Mary said. Not whispers. Voices. Ethan nodded. Tomorrow's Sunday. Everyone will be at church. Lucas frowned. Church doesn't make people brave. No, Ethan said, but it puts them together. The next morning, the church was full. Mary stood when the hymns ended. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. My husband died because we drank poison water, she said. If your children are sick, if your cattle are dying, if your wells taste like metal, stand with me. Silence. Then Clara Finch stood. My son can't hold a pencil. Another man rose. Lost 4 cows last winter. A woman whispered, then spoke louder. My baby has seizures. The room shifted. Fear cracked. That afternoon, the sheriff rode past the cabin without stopping. That night, someone threw a rock through the window. Ethan didn't flinch, because fear had changed shape. And once fear turns to fire, it spreads fast. The courthouse bell rang once. Then again. By the 3rd ring, the street was full. Mary Bennett stood at the bottom of the steps with Lucas's hand locked in hers. The boy wore his clean shirt, the one his father had sewn the buttons on before the mill collapse. His shoulders were tight, but his chin was lifted. Ethan stood on Lucas's other side. Not in front, not behind, beside. Inside, the courtroom smelled of dust and old wood. Every bench was filled. Men who had crossed the street to avoid Mary now sat close enough to hear her breathe. The sheriff stood near the wall, arms folded, face unreadable. Judge Harold Crow entered last. This hearing concerns the guardianship of Lucas Bennett, he began, and the status of the Bennett property. Mary stood. I speak for myself, she said. A murmur moved through the room. The mill's lawyer rose. Young, confident, paper sharp. Mrs. Bennett's land is failing, he said smoothly. She is unable to maintain proper living conditions. The child has been seen unsupervised, and a transit man has been residing on the property. Ethan felt Lucas's fingers tighten. Mary didn't look at the lawyer. She looked at the judge. My son is supervised, she said, by love, by work, by truth, and the man you call a transit saved us when your men came with threats instead of law. The lawyer smiled thinly. Do you have proof? Mary nodded. Ethan stepped forward and placed a jar on the bench. This is water from the Bennett well, he said. Collected, sealed, and labeled by Mary's husband before he died. The judge frowned. And you are? Ethan Hale, former foreman, former miner. The word miner rippled through the room. I worked the mill, Ethan continued. I saw the runoff. I smelled it. I watched men get sick and told myself it was the price of work. The lawyer scoffed. Speculation. Then hear from the town, Mary said. She turned. If your family has been harmed by the water, stand. No one moved. Lucas swallowed. Then Clara Finch stood. My son's blood tests show metal poisoning. A man rose behind her. Lost my cattle. Another. My wife's been sick 2 years. Another. 7 people stood. The room felt smaller, heavier. The sheriff shifted. The judge leaned forward. This court will not ignore multiple claims. The lawyer snapped. This is not a mining inquiry. No, the judge said slowly, but it explains motive. The sheriff cleared his throat. I'd like to speak, he said. Every head turned. I was told to pressure Mrs. Bennett, he admitted. I was told it was legal. I was wrong. Gasps. Mary closed her eyes. The judge's voice hardened. This court dismisses the guardianship petition effective immediately. No transfer of land will occur until a full investigation is completed. Lucas looked up. Mama? Mary knelt and pulled him into her arms. Yes, baby, she whispered. We're still together. The room emptied slowly. Outside, sunlight poured down like forgiveness. Ethan stepped back. This was their moment. Mary looked at him. You could have left. I didn't, he said. Lucas hugged him hard. You stayed. That night, someone knocked on the cabin door, a federal marshal, and the truth finally had a witness who couldn't be bought. The federal marshal stayed 3 days, 3 long, quiet days where truth stopped being a whisper and started becoming a record. Water samples were taken from the creek, the well, and the land upstream. Names were written down, dates confirmed, statements signed. The mill shut down operations by the end of the week. No sirens, no celebration, just silence, the kind that comes when something rotten is finally exposed to air. Judge Crow issued a permanent dismissal of the custody petition. The sheriff resigned 2 mornings later, leaving town before sunrise. The mill's lawyer never returned. Life didn't snap back to normal. It grew forward instead. Mary replanted the garden in the burned soil. Lucas helped, dirt under his nails, hope in his chest. Clara Finch came by with her son, then another neighbor, then another. The fence was rebuilt stronger. The well was sealed until it could be cleaned properly. And Ethan stayed. At first, no one asked why. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the valley gold, Lucas sat beside Ethan on the porch steps. "Are you still running?" the boy asked. Ethan considered the question. For years ago, he would have said yes. Running from guilt, from failure, from the sound of his brother's voice buried under stone. But that sound didn't haunt him the same way anymore. "No," he said. "I think I stopped." Lucas leaned his shoulder against Ethan's arm. "Good. Mama says runners miss the best parts." Mary watched them from the doorway. She hadn't asked Ethan to stay. She never would have. Needing still frightened her. Trust always did. But one night, after Lucas fell asleep, she sat beside Ethan at the table and placed a folded paper between them. A deed. Her land. Not signed. Just there. "You don't owe us," she said quietly. "I know. I won't survive another promise that leaves." Ethan didn't reach for the paper. He reached for the truth. "I'm not here to fix what's already broken," he said. "I'm here to build what comes next. If you'll let me." Mary closed her eyes. Then she nodded once. That spring, the water ran clear again. Lucas turned 8 and broke his first horse, just like his father promised he would someday. Ethan stood at the fence rail, heart full in a way he hadn't believed possible. Later that night, Lucas asked a question that had been sitting between them for weeks. "Ethan?" "Yeah, buddy. Can a man choose to be family?" Ethan swallowed. "Yes," he said. "He can." Mary stood in the doorway, listening. She didn't interrupt, because some moments don't need witnesses. Years later, people would tell the story differently. They'd say the town changed because of a court ruling, because of federal law, because of paperwork and signatures. But the truth was simpler. A boy stood barefoot in the dirt and grabbed a stranger's leg. A man who'd been running chose to stop. And a woman who'd carried the world alone learned that strength didn't mean solitude. Some men ride forever, and some are pulled off the road by a small hand and a quiet plea that says, "Please, help us." That's where Ethan Hale stopped running. And that's where everything finally began.